Buenas tardes de nuevo, bienvenidos de vuelta. Ya vamos entrando en la recta final de nuestro evento. Esperemos que hayan disfrutado muy buen almuerzo porque bueno, lo que se viene está muy bueno también. Bueno, creo que no hace falta mayor presentación, pero para las personas que no conozcan un poco el profile de nuestro invitado, él es británico de nacimiento y criado en Atenas, es educador, autor y orador, de éxito aclamado por la crítica y uno de los expertos en blockchain abiertos y de Bitcoin más importantes del mundo. En el 2014 fue autor del novedoso libro Master in Bitcoin, bestseller, y considerado como la mejor guía técnica jamás escrita sobre esta tecnología. Su segundo libro, The Internet of Money, de 2016, explica los posibles impactos de la tecnología en la civilización humana. El tan esperado segundo volumen de Internet of Money se lanzó a finales del 2017 y vendió miles de copias en el primer mes. Su cuarto libro, Master in Ethereum, sigue rápidamente esta tendencia y se publicará este otoño. Señores, con ustedes, Andreas Antonopoulos.
First of all, allow me to thank you all for being here today and for this fantastic turnout, and also to thank Jorge Farias and CryptoBuyer for organizing this event and inviting me. It's been a great pleasure for me to be here and a fantastic opportunity. Last year, I published The Internet of Money in Spanish, El Internet del Dinero, and Jorge was very kind to sell some copies here. Let me say in advance that if you want me to sign your book, I'll be happy to do that as soon as we're done with this. I'll be sticking around until about 4 p.m. And I would like to meet and talk with as many of you as possible at that time. All right. Why did I publish a book in Spanish? The biggest focus for me for the past 2 years has been internationalizing this message. The unfortunate truth is that a lot of the information in the space, whether it's Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, blockchains in general, is in English. And that represents an enormous barrier for adoption and understanding across the world. Language is one of the greatest difficulties for adoption for this technology. Technical literacy, access to smartphones, access to the internet, many of those things are available to a lot of people who don't have bank accounts. But speaking fluent English or being able to understand technical concepts in English is very difficult. So for me, one of the most important things in my journey has been to try to make sure that as much as the content and work I do as possible is available in as many languages as possible. And I've had the great fortune of having many supporters who volunteer their time to translate my work into different languages. So the good news. Of the 300 or so videos I've done so far, about 75 of them, the largest number than any other language, have subtitles in Spanish. All thanks to the work of volunteers. All of my books are available in Spanish. And that's going to continue with my next book, which is Mastering Ethereum. And most importantly, these books are also available as open source content, which means that people can download this information in Spanish for free, share it, mash it up, use it to build courses, use it to build tutorials, use it to build workshops. Education is the number one effort in our space today. In order for us to really see this as a technology that has within it the potential to bring freedom and opportunity and choice to billions of people around the world, in order to focus on the technology and not the price, the education and not the speculation, the investment in skills and not in assets, the use of this cryptocurrency technology as a way to earn your income, not buy the crypto, we have to make it accessible to as many people as possible, and that starts with language. Which is why I'm sorry I can't do this in Spanish. I would love to. But I'm trying to learn as fast as possible. Some of us in this space are far more skilled than others. I watch with great humility as Vitalik Buterin decides to learn Mandarin and in 18 months delivers a presentation in fluent Mandarin on Chinese TV. Well, not all of us can be Vitalik. I'm here today because I believe that Panama is one of the most important locations for the development of cryptocurrency throughout Central and South America. Both because of the multicultural and multinational element, because it is a geographic crossroads, but also because it is a country that has traditionally and historically been at the forefront of financial services. And it offers access to many people to financial services from all across the region who don't have access. South America is one of the places where Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and blockchain technology is actually needed. You don't need it in Los Angeles. You don't need it in Chicago. You don't need it in New York. You can use your Visa card. Most people have a bank account. In fact, the people who don't have a bank account in the United States are mostly Spanish-speaking immigrants who don't have the documentation to have a bank account. They need it. And people in South America need cryptocurrencies because of the historical level of corruption, economic difficulty, and currency crises, which have happened again and again and again throughout the region. Which, of course, all of these things are the result of colonialism. Centuries of colonialism. And today, Western democracies, they're cool. They're liberal. Right? So they can't do colonialism the way they used to do it. At the end of a bayonet. Not for the most part. So colonialism now is more subtle. It's wrapped in a nice little package. We just call it competitive commerce, globalization, opening of borders. Globalization, as it is understood and practiced, is nothing more than good old-fashioned colonialism. Only now it's not delivered with force, it's delivered with financial embargoes. It's delivered with financial controls. It's delivered with coercion that implies that if you don't play along with the games, you get cut off from the US dollar, you get cut off from the SWIFT network, you get cut off from access to international banking, you get cut off from the IMF, you get cut off from access to international commerce. Globalization is not something you and I readily participate in. It is something that multinational companies and powerful countries can use to set themselves outside the law, to arbitrage jurisdictions, to shop around for the most convenient, corruptible, lowest taxation environment where they can deliver financial colonialism wrapped as globalization. Globalization has a negative connotation among most people because to the average person, all it's delivered is lawless corporations, exploitation, and tariffs, ironically. What cryptocurrencies do is they change the nature of globalization from something that is inherently centralized and available only to the most powerful, the most disinterested and distanced corporations, to you, directly, as individuals. Not all of us. For the time being, just the few who are fortunate enough to have the education, the access, the capital to participate, but every day more and more people can use cryptocurrencies to achieve a decentralized form of globalization, one that allows individuals to shop around for jurisdictions, to arbitrage between currencies, to pick the law that serves their interests. And until now, the only way individuals could take advantage of globalization would be to physically move. And in order for someone to leave their country, to take their family across borders, to go to another country where they're not welcomed, where they're treated as second class, where they're discriminated against, the only reason someone would do that is desperation, survival. Globalization is refugees. But what if you could leave your currency system without leaving your country? What if you could become an international participant in commerce without leaving your country? What if you could become a multinational corporation of one person? I know that sounds ridiculous, but part of the reason why governments are opposed in many cases to cryptocurrencies is because of the power it gives to individuals to behave like multinational corporations. When governments say, but if everyone has access to cryptocurrencies, they won't pay taxes, you should ask, well, what about all of the multinationals that didn't pay taxes? You didn't seem to be that concerned about those until now. Now that everyone can do it, now it's a problem. But if individuals can move their money, they won't be subject to our controls. Rich people and multinational corporations can already do that. You weren't in the Panama Papers, but other people were. You may have noticed there weren't that many Americans in the Panama Papers. That's because the world's greatest tax haven is the United States. That's because Americans don't need to go to Panama to get offshore capabilities. They can go to Nevada. As long as they're rich enough and can afford the lawyers and the accountants and set themselves up with corporations to take advantage of globalization right at home. Cryptocurrencies are scary to many governments because what they do is they empower the individual to have the same capabilities. And this is one of the interesting effects of technology. It is the ability to acquire superpowers through the application of technology. We don't appreciate the historical impact of technology in those terms. But as I'm speaking right now, a number of people in the audience are filming me with smartphones. The idea of an individual carrying a television studio with international broadcast capabilities in their pocket 50 years ago would be a superpower. You'd make a superhero movie around that capability. The idea to pull out a device and make a video call was Star Trek 50 years ago. And the ability of an individual to wire money across the globe in seconds and convert between currencies as if they're some kind of New York stockbroker from their village in Guatemala using a solar panel and a $20 Android phone. Make no mistake, that is a superpower. And the person in the village who has that superpower is a superhero. And they can fight for justice, just like Superman and Spider-Man, on behalf of the people around them. As Jorge said earlier, There are places in the world where people don't have access to clean water, but they have a smartphone, or at least a cell phone. And as the prices of smartphones decline, gradually that capability comes into the hands of more and more people. We are on the cusp of something very important. We hold a communications device. At the same time, cryptocurrencies have turned money into a communications protocol, which makes every communications device a banking system. Not a bank account, a bank. When you have a smartphone with cryptocurrencies in your pocket, you don't have a Swiss bank account in your pocket, as Obama famously said. You are a Swiss banker. And that superpower can change the world for a lot of people. And who objects to that? Mostly those who are already bankers. They don't see the need for this technology. Who needs Bitcoin? Says the person who has 3 brokerage accounts, a Swiss bank account, access to precious metals, no currency controls, the world's most stable currency at their fingertips. Not you, sir. Clearly not you. And if you say nobody needs cryptocurrency, that's because you have never seen beyond your little bubble. When I first started traveling and talking about this technology around the world, one of the things that struck me was that in Western developed countries, I had to spend a lot of time explaining why cryptocurrencies are necessary. First time I went to Argentina, not a single person asked me why. They asked me how. How do we do this now? Why? Why is obvious. We're in our 5th currency crisis, and 30 years ago, our own government was throwing people out of airplanes because they had a different political opinion. The why is obvious. The how is important. That gap, that geographical gap, is critical to understanding the impact of cryptocurrencies around the world. When people say, we don't need cryptocurrencies, the question you should ask is, who is we? Who is the we that doesn't need access to the financial system? The we that already has it. 2.5 billion people have no access to financial services. That's based on how the World Bank counts just the heads of household of working age who have no access to any form of banking. That massively underestimates their families, their children. It massively underestimates the number of people who have de minimis access to financial services. The ability to have an expensive, massively controlled bank account in one currency only that requires them every day to jump over hurdles of corruption and bribery and coercion to trade in a currency that's being inflated to shit by their own government. That's not the banked. That's the underbanked. And if you start counting it that way, you realize that the number of people who really have access to financial services the way I have access to financial services, the way the privileged few in Western countries have access to financial services, is maybe 1.5 billion people. And that leaves the other 6 billion who don't. And so in the early days of Bitcoin, people said, let's bank the unbanked. And now we're beginning to learn that we can aspire to an even loftier goal, which is let's debank all of us. We don't need to bank the unbanked. We need to remove the necessity for intermediaries, for custodians, for controllers of our commerce, for controlling our financial future and our ability to manage that financial future, to get rid of the anachronistic, nationalistic, feudalistic systems of money that have persisted for centuries. Together with the geography gap, there is a generational gap. If you talk to people over a certain age and you say, hey, magical internet money that exists on the web, and you email it to people and it's controlled by an algorithm, they seem terrified by this idea. How does it have value? Who controls it? But what will happen to the world if no one controls it? They understand, or think they understand, how their national money works. Generally speaking, most people don't. If they did, that'd probably be a revolution. For many people, this technology is too strange. The idea that no one controls it, that you can have rules without rulers, that systems can be simultaneously anarchic, meaning without leaders, but entirely predictable and rules-based. That you can have a system of currency where I can tell you what the interest rate will be 30 years from now, to 3 decimals of precision. But I can't tell you what the interest rate will be for the US dollar next Friday, because that's going to be decided by 12 people I didn't vote for. That has plenty of rulers, but seemingly no rules. And we're suggesting replacing that with something that has no rulers, but very, very, very strict rules, mathematical controls. People say, cryptocurrency isn't regulated. Cryptocurrency is regulated. It's regulated to 10 decimal points by algorithms. It's regulated by predictable mathematics. It's regulated every 10 minutes by a process of consensus in the case of Bitcoin. It is utterly predictable and deterministic. Yes, weird things are happening. Forks and debates and things like that. And in all of that, did the block settlement time change? Still 10 minutes. Did we issue more than 21 million coins? Nope. Did the people in charge change? There weren't any people in charge. There still aren't people in charge. For all of the screaming and shouting, 9 years later, every 10 minutes, like a heartbeat, a block comes out, predictably. And this is now happening across thousands of cryptocurrencies. There has never been a financial network that remains operational 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, with no interruption for 9 years. This has never happened before. There has never been a financial system that allows everyone in the world access through a simple personal device. The ability to do international commerce on the scale of a multinational bank for an individual. There has never been a technology like this. And so when people say, I'm scared, I don't know what's going to happen next, I don't understand this, all that tells you, generally speaking, is their age. I'm scared too. I'm getting older and harder for me to absorb change. I find myself struggling to keep up. I read incessantly just to keep up with people who are younger than me, who have more elastic brains, and are easier to change. But the real gap, the real generational gap, is this. Every child born today will never live in a world where cryptocurrencies didn't exist. Will never live in a world before the internet, We'll never live in a world before Bitcoin. We'll never live in a world before individual freedom in commerce. And so, this person who grows up with a system like that doesn't know that it's not always been like that. Doesn't know that it could be any other way. And if you tell a young person, money is an internet protocol, which you can transmit freely anywhere in the world, they look at you strangely. They go, well, of course it is. What do you mean? In my days, money was printed on cotton and linseed fabric with green ink. And we kept it in our pockets. And we had to physically meet the other person and hand them this germ-ridden piece of fabric. And it had no value, but the government that had a complete monopoly in issuing it and could issue as much as it wanted told us that it had value. And then one day, we just got pieces of plastic that allowed us to do the same transaction, only now it was even more controlled and under totalitarian surveillance at all times. You're crazy, Grandpa. There's no way that's how money worked. That makes no sense. I can just imagine now, 20 years from now, a young student of economics at university is given a paper and they have to write about the history of central banking. And they're struggling because they can't understand why any people would allow the entire nation's finances to be decided by a group of 12 people who are unelected and meet every Friday in person and then announce to the rest of the economy what the interest rate will be. It's mind-blowing. It's almost like looking back and seeing people with wigs, riding horses around, and taking a week to get from one side of the country to the other if they don't die of cholera on the way there. So imagine that 10-year-old who is not allowed to have access to a bank account until they're 16 years old, who cannot buy anything online with a credit card until they're 16 years old, who has to beg their mom or their dad to give them access to the iTunes card or the Amazon account. Or, as one little ingenious kid I watched did, who waited until mommy was sleeping and used her thumbprint to buy all of his Christmas presents on Amazon on her phone. And at that point, if you're the parent, you can't decide if you should be furious or really impressed for the sheer ingenuity. But imagine that 10-year-old using cryptocurrencies, trading those cryptocurrencies with their friends, and they're doing that now. And if you're a parent and you have kids that age, you don't even know they're doing it. They're doing it. And if you tell them not to, then they'll double do it. They're going to grow up in this environment. They're going to have access to personal, private money that you don't know about, that they trade with their friends, that they use to buy things for themselves. They will establish financial autonomy by the time they're 10 or 12, once they figure out how to use this technology, which they'll do about 20 times faster than you, and then they'll maybe explain it to you if you're good. And then imagine the scenario where they walk into a bank at 16 years old and they sit down with a banker. And a banker tells them, you can access your account Monday to Friday, 9 to 5 p.m. For the privilege of us holding control over your money, we will charge you $5 a month if you don't maintain sufficient balance, on which we will give you an interest rate of 0.01% You will not be able to exchange it for any other currency. You will only be able to buy things from merchants we approve of, unless there's a currency embargo or some moralistic crusade against your favorite thing. But don't dare spend $1 that you don't have in there, because then the interest rate is 25%. And at random times, we will shut down your accounts and block your transactions because one of your transactions had the word Bitcoin in it. And we're terrified old people who don't understand what the fuck that is. And that kid will walk out of that bank and go, that's insane. Why would I ever do that? Everything they do, I can do faster, I can do more securely, I can do for less cost with absolute control. But that's not how it's going to play out. It's not going to happen that way. And the simple reason is that there won't be a bank for that kid to walk into. Because the fundamental function of storing your assets for you will not exist in a couple of decades. It cannot exist because it is unnecessary, because it is expensive. Most importantly, because it is oppressive to those who can have it, and it is denied from the vast majority of the people on this planet. And they will simply make the choice to do without. Will there be people who have bank accounts? Absolutely. Does anyone in this audience own a horse? Have you ever ridden a horse? Yeah, a couple of people. Fantastic. It's not your primary means of transportation. It's a hobby. Maybe. Maybe it is your primary means of transportation, but for most people it isn't, right? If daddy buys you a pony, you're a princess. 100 years ago, if daddy bought you a pony, you were supposed to ride that to the farm and work. The bottom line is that these technologies won't eradicate banking. They'll simply make it the obscure, weird hobby of a few curmudgeonly diehards who like to still do things the old way. Every now and then, I walk into a supermarket and I'm waiting patiently to do my shopping, and someone in the front of the line pulls out a checkbook. And 20 people in the line go, ugh. That person will never use a credit card. And neither will your children. Because it will be just as ridiculous as obsolete as taking a steam engine, riding a horse, driving your own car, using cash or a credit card, or more importantly, using a bank. The greatest illusion that humanity is under is the lack of change. We spend most of our lives assuming that everything that has happened to us now is how it always was, and being shocked when we learn that in the past, people did weird things that we don't understand. And that's the first half of our lives. If we're lucky to live long enough, then we go into the far more traumatic time when we try to desperately hold on to things not changing while the world around us goes insane. Socrates wrote that the youth of his age had lost all sense of morality and propriety, of common sense, because all they wanted to do is go to the theater, this most vulgar of arts, instead of study philosophy as their parents did. And the generation after him probably found something else to rail against. When I was young, certain movies were considered vulgar. Now, the cinema is an art form. Even television is becoming an obsolete art form. And the youth of our day are wasting their energy and common sense on video games and cryptocurrencies and other things we can't understand. The world just changed. It changed radically. And anybody who tells you that this thing can be stopped or delayed or banned doesn't understand human nature. When you have a technology that delivers so much power to individuals, there is nothing that can stop them from exercising that power. Satoshi Nakamoto is a modern-day Prometheus who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. Unlike Prometheus, they were smart enough to disappear because the gods were really pissed off at Prometheus and they tied him to a rock and tortured him for eternity, which is pretty much what would have happened to Satoshi Nakamoto too. The smartest thing Satoshi did was disappear, and the second smartest thing was invent Bitcoin. And now that it's happened, we have this incredible power. This is a superpower. Make no mistake. Every individual that learns how to use this technology can become a superhero, a financial superhero for their entire community. And no matter how much the gods are pissed off, they can't take it back. Thank you.